I'm Marcia Davis with the City of Spokane, and I'm the moderator for this section. So you won't see me very much, that's a good thing. We've got really great presenters for this session. Recent growths and other grant projects, where are they now? And we have two people from ecology. Dan Gariepy will be starting this presentation. He is with the Department of Ecology, with the Stormwater Engineering. And we have Jessica Swing, which is also with the Department of Ecology, with the Stormwater Program.
Thanks so much. I want to make special mention again to Jessica for being a special guest speaker. I do a lot of the engineering review for grants, and there's many components to grants, and I think that I'm very grateful for Jessica for taking the time today to start us off with talking about more of the program itself, whereas I get into the mechanics of it. So I'm going to have her start off our talk today, just going over the world's briefest overview of some of the grants that ecology offers.
So, Jessica Schwing, I'm the coordinator for the Ecology Stormwater Grants Program, and so I'm going to give you a brief overview of the different types of programs we offer and kind of how they're out there to help our implementers across the state do good work and protect Washington water quality from the detrimental effects of stormwater. One of the exciting points here is that ecology pretty much has some type of funding source to help you with almost any type of water quality project. We do everything from low impact development projects, stormwater retrofits, innovative outreach programs, permit implementation projects, fun things like this conference. So we look at almost anything that has a water quality benefit, and we're working to try and create a program that's streamlined, that allows, because most folks out there who are doing stormwater are not grant writers by nature, that's sort of other duties as assigned. So we're trying to work to make the process as simple and streamlined as we can for y'all. Since between 2006 and 2012, ecology has provided about $200 million in stormwater to local jurisdictions. Most of that has been for capital construction projects, and those are the boots on the ground shovel projects that you see out there, impeding traffic and things like that when you're trying to get from point A to point B. So that's what usually our biggest dollar amounts there. Second is our capacity building projects, and these are the direct money that's given directly to Phase 1, Phase 2 permittees to help them develop the capacity in their own agencies to implement the stormwater projects. And then a third is we have a small pot of money that helps with innovative programs or programs that help regional projects. So our combined funding program, the one that is closing Friday, so if you don't know about this one already, get ready for next year. It closes first week in November every year. This is a program that offers grants, loans, forgivable principal loans, different types of assistance for wastewater, non-point, stormwater, on-site sewage, big funding package. And to feed this combined program, we use 4 different funding sources. We have our state revolving fund that the seed money comes from the federal government and EPA. We have our Centennial Fund that's state funded for particularly for non-point, and that can be grant or loan. And then we have 319, which is federal money that's passed through again. And then our newest program is the Stormwater Financial Assistance Program, which is state money again. That's the $66 million everyone's talking about that's being fed into our combined program. And kind of the upshot of this is you come in as a jurisdiction, you come in with a water quality project, and you put your best project forward together, and we will bring it forth, go through our application process, and we will mix and match the funding sources to fit your project. So if you have something that's a combined, you've got combined non-point education plus perhaps a bioretention retrofit, instead of trying to apply to multiple different grant programs and parcel your project out that way, the idea is you can come in with one project and we'll fit the funding sources. And each of these funding sources do have their own set of restrictions about, based on the legislation that built them, about who can apply and who can receive. So there are some fine details in there, but kind of the big picture idea is you come in with a water quality project, we find a way to help you either through grant or loan. Beyond our combined funding program for all water quality, we also have a couple different stormwater specific programs that come on a biannual basis rather than our combined program that comes on an annual basis. And these programs have been really focused in on permit activities that help multiple jurisdictions. First, and the one that Dan's going to talk about more thoroughly, is our grants of regional or statewide significance. Now, these come on a biannual basis. They are competitive grants, and they're intended to basically be pilot programs or programs that are going to help region-wide, or that could be duplicated either across a region or across a state. And that provides sort of a workshop and a way to fund some of these really neat, innovative ideas that come out. I mean, for example, this conference is actually funded through a grant of regional or statewide significance. Once again, these are focused primarily for phase 1, phase 2 permittees that can apply for these projects. Once again, because we want them to help kind of build innovative ways of getting at these permit problems. We also have our capacity grants, and these are a really sweet little plum. They are non-competitive. They are a straight pass-through grant. So only thing our permittees have to do is sign an agreement saying, yes, we'd like that money, please. They're paid on a reimbursement basis for activities or items that help permittees implement their permits. So we pay through these project capacity grants. We've paid for sweeping programs, ed and outreach programs, folks who need a specialized piece of equipment for stormwater or something like a Vector truck. There's all sorts of items that we've been able to pay through capacity grants on a reimbursement basis. We do ask for permittees that if they have a particular item that their permit manager has identified that they are out of compliance with, or there's a particular hotspot issue, that they use this pass-through capacity money to address those items first. These projects the capacity grants are not intended to help you build facilities or to help build a pervious pavement sidewalk somewhere, that type of thing. It's really about building the ability within a jurisdiction to actually implement their phase 1, phase 2 permit. So this kind of big mix between our combined program and then the gross grants and the capacity grants, they're working to try and achieve a little bit of a balance and a mix between the challenges of both implementing your permit and going above and beyond the permit to come up with innovative solutions or address issues that are particular to a local community. So we look at trying to find a balance with this mix of grant programs. And one of the things that's helping us figure out what this mix and what this balance will be and really refine that is our program stakeholder group. Your moderator today, Marcia, she sits on that stakeholder group, and we have representatives from big communities, small communities, Eastern, Western Washington, and they all come together in a room at just about every month, and we chat about how the policies that within our grant program are really affecting the implementers, and how things like scheduling or addressing issues where jurisdictions are finding cost-effective ways of solving pollution problems, and how we can tailor our grant programs to really address those types of things. The stakeholder group also looks at our guidelines and provides input, and we spend a lot of time discussing the reviewing and the ranking criteria to determine how we really get at water quality and what is not only a project that provides good water quality, but provides it at a good value for the state. So we get a lot of great feedback from folks who are on the ground implementing these projects. So we're trying to keep ecology from just operating in a bubble up there. Let's see. So if you're interested in learning more about what the stakeholder group is doing, this is our website. And we have the meeting minutes, meeting materials, and all the contact information and emails for the folks that sit on this work group. And this work group is going to be, we've been meeting since last October monthly. We're continuing through the next year as we build out our long-term stormwater funding program and work with our environmental groups and our lobbyists that are trying to help bring some type of funding source to permanently keep stormwater prominent and well-funded in our combined funding program. And with that, I'm going to turn over to Dan, who's going to talk more about, going to give you the story of a couple great projects, what kind of pollution problems they're addressing, and how they creatively got at the answer.
So I was asked by the organizing committee, Ecology has done this for a couple of years. What is going on with these projects? What's been happening? And I wanted to just take a select few. There's over 300 to choose from. So if anyone sitting in this room gets their feelings hurt that I haven't talked about your project, know there's probably at least another 290 people who are just as bitter. So the grants of regional or statewide significance, those really are focusing all about going to the permittees and seeing what it is that they feel is important. And they come to us with proposals. It's one of our more wide open grant programs that it's really directed by those who are putting in the applications. And so I've picked just a couple of projects that talked about what some of the grant recipients felt was important and came up with some really great projects. The Eastern Washington LID manual. Low impact development does not just happen on the west side of the mountains. And the east side for several years didn't have a dedicated resource to talk about this. Their Stormwater manual, it's also set to be updated soon. It preceded a lot of the low impact development things. And so Spokane County was successful in getting this grant, and they moved forward with some consultants to put together this really great, and I think it was well-received manual. I really liked the way this manual directed things more towards how the eastern side looked at low impact development. There's terms that they felt comfortable with that weren't what in Western Washington we would talk about. If you look at this slide, it's kind of in small print, sorry about that. It goes from slow to soak. Well, in Western Washington, I think we always feel like we're soaked. So, those aren't terms that we would have used, and they talk about hard and soft. And so these are all more regional specific, but it covered all of Eastern Washington. I think that filled a really great hole that was there. And the approach was very visual. It was integrated into a website, which was successful. And it included some training that I'll talk about in a little bit, that they, again, videotaped because we can never videotape enough. And it was really well received, and it remains there. The manual took an innovative approach. There's a web interface that's a lot more integrated than a lot of our other manuals right now. And it's been well received, and I think it was a great success story as to how a local area sees a need and was able to fill it with one of these grants. So if you were at another talk, you'd probably hear a lot more about this right now. The illicit discharge and discovery and elimination guidance. We had talked about this program, but some permittees identified that this was something that they needed a little more hands-on help about what kind of screening tools should we be using in the field. And so this project came about through King County. I think it was also very successful. Again, we have you see a theme of we like to make it user-friendly and pictures. What does stormwater not look like in a storm drain? Is orange and bright fluorescent normal? And so some of these pictures kind of illustrate what you might be trying to trace back to. That's just kind of one of the guide sheets. This manual is kind of chock full of pictures and helpful checklists to help you identify when you're doing field screening what kind of things you should look for. And with all these gross grants, our idea is that they were talking about stealing this morning if you were at some of those talks. These are all very stealable things. We try to centralize it through ecology so that we can make this available to anyone who's interested in adopting it. So, there's remains a great presence. Again, I'm sure it's on the web. There's 14 videos they have to talk about different types of screening techniques for illicit discharge elimination. It's still is heavily referenced, and I think it's going to be a great resource moving forward that's going to last for a long time and be very helpful. And of course, we talked about supporting some of those requirements of the permit. There's an education requirement, but it also, in this case, the City of Federal Way was interested in helping with some of their educational requirements. So this was a great combination and mutual benefit that they experienced by doing this Storming with the Sound curriculum and pilot project. So Federal Way built these beautiful models and this manual that went with it. They had a whole teaching guide that went with it, and it included important information that fit with the educational system because Washington has specific educational goals, and they told how these goals could be met when you're talking about stormwater runoff and how it's going to affect the salmon. So the program centers around these very practical salmon rearing exercises where they actually take salmon, rear them, and then have a fish release. And then they have the part of this this guidance includes a manual on how do you build this station, where you can get the parts. It's really specific. This particular one was kind of great. I don't know if you can see it with the glare, but they have an actual street sitting on top of the stream with little houses and everything. I thought it was just brilliant. And then there's some of the more generic ones that they were able to install. I think they had 50 or 60 of them. I forget how many, but they installed all these tanks in the schools, so it became spread throughout the community. Get the kids talking to their parents about the importance of it. And of course, you can't ignore some of the other outreach materials. I'm going to have to break out of this for a minute to make this work. This was a very successful campaign that was taken on through the grant programs, but it was controversial, and I have to share it with you. I cannot not play this. Do I have audio off of this? I think I do. Okay, great. I promise I won't run through the whole thing.
Yeah. You know what? I like the fusion sound. Dog Dookie D, no doubt. Play on, Puget. Play on, Puget. Yo, dog, drop the deuce. Doggy, get down, good dog. Baby, gotta walk through C-Town. And all around the Puget Sound, cover much ground, you ain't a hound from the town. In the rain, it's a good day, each and every day, the Northwest way. The girl and the dog, they were fine, wow, until they left for duty, has a crime. East side to the west side, pushing I-5, take a ferry ride. I hope she got treats in the stash, bacon gives a gas, fast when it comes to the snacks. I noticed that dance, it's on when she kicks like a rabbit. Doggy, when you do your do, I'm gonna help you. Can I get down so I can? I like the way you walk it, dog took it. We got to bag it up. I like the way you walk it.
All right. I can't steal the enjoyment of the entire thing for you guys later. All right. So, but there was controversy around this. I can't even, obviously. I mean, how can you not have controversy over dog poo? That was actually one of the elements of controversy was that they were repulsed that they were doing this. It was actually fake dog poo, so that was covered. But this program, for all the chuckles and laughs that it gets, hundreds of thousands of views, and it was this great artist. I thought it was really well put together, and something that you have to explore every avenue to reach people with outreach. And so I'm glad we got to do that. Okay, now this is more transitioning to the construction grants that are now living in part of the integrated program, but previously, I think the largest burst we got of it was in 2010, 2011 is when these really started to hit. And I can't get the numbers, and Heather alluded to 250. I think there's over, what's that, 250? Yeah. Well, and then there's some design grants besides that. Yeah. So there's plenty of activity going on with this with these things, and believe it or not, it does take a while to put things in the ground. So some of these are still going on. Some of the first wave are still going on. We're closing them out now, but we're just starting to get some feedback, and some of them have happened. I thought I'd share a couple that were successful, just to give you an idea of the things we're seeing come in, and some of the great things we're getting out of it. City of Vancouver started out with this. I'm talking about one project, but they actually did a couple of these. Peterson residential LID retrofits. Those lovely little green things are oh my God, I almost said rain gardens. They're bioretention, I know. So they're bioretention facilities. All right, there's 10 lashes for calling them rain gardens. In Ecology's manual, it's really important that we make that distinction between rain gardens and bioretention. It's a very difficult message to get out to the public. People know what rain gardens are, and they don't appreciate what bioretention is. So there's actually a little bit of controversy about what we call those things, but when we give out the money, we say, hey, let's talk about bioretention, because it's those engineered layers and sections we're looking for. So we just want to be sure we're all talking about the same thing. So in this case, City of Vancouver had this area where they wanted to put some bioretention facilities in along the street that was way too wide. There was some, I apologize to City of Vancouver if they're here, I'm going to mangle how this happened. But for some reason, they ended up with the street that was way too wide. It was originally planned for another use that was going to be an arterial, and it did not turn out that way. So they had all this pavement and nothing to do with it. They only needed a couple of lanes, and there was dangers of oncoming traffic. So they used this multiple benefit approach where they had this bioretention go in with great infiltration rates. It was a great project as it went out. They planned it well. They had all the space. They were converting impervious into bioretention, and really it was really well tailored for our grant program, because our focus is on the treatment facility. So all they needed to do here was just cut it out and put it in. So there was so much of this that was funded for them, and they were really pleased about that. They did so well that they actually ended up being able to put in more for what they estimated. You don't always hear that happening. So it was kind of a really exciting project for me to be a part of. The city of Tacoma did this pervious street project, doesn't seem too far away from here, where they managed, they have a heavily urbanized area, and the opportunities for doing a good amount of stormwater treatment and flow control can be limited. In this particular case, there is some creeks in the area that will be impacted by doing a good amount of flow control. And so this was a really great opportunity for them to go within a residential neighborhood and put in a permeable pavement road for the full length. They did a good job of characterizing it. They did a good job of implementing it. I remember I've toured the site with Tacoma, and the thing they talked about that I think that Jessica would want me to share is they're not so sure they need the curbs. They have gutters and curbs, and to get the full benefit, really sometimes there's things that run into the curbs that they could have captured in the permeable pavement. So they would do that a little differently. But I thought this was a great project that they managed to have the neighbors buy into, and it's been a great success. There's a lot of, in this area, I know Tacoma has focused a lot on trying to do some flow control through permeable pavements, and so it was good for ecology to see that they had a plan and that this was part of their success, and that they could do it because they had good information on what they were going to take on. We cannot forget and head back over to the east side. Country Homes Boulevard restoration. Again, this is another one of those. These construction grants are focused on retrofits of treating existing areas. So this one was another great one where they had this fantastic gully in the middle that took a fantastic amount of water, but was going into a really small creek. And it was efficient, but it wasn't doing a lot for treating the stormwater, and also, when you're going into a small creek, you're dramatically increasing the impacts you're going to have by putting that on an express speedway down the middle of the road. So we were only part of the project, and that happens sometimes. They had some other funding sources to take up the rest of it. But they used this combination of sources to get this project funded, and this is what they ended up doing. They cut down that middle, and they made it a bunch of a continuous bioretention swale. And I wasn't the one directly managing this project, and I have to say that about most projects. Even when I am the technical consultant on it, I don't pretend to be the engineer designing it. I'm only lucky enough to look at it and get some general ideas of how the stormwater is working. I have to give the credit to the engineers out there and to the municipalities who are doing this. But I noticed when they did a great job of integrating, there's that mat there where they need a little bit more, obviously they need a little more strength, so they used that mat to help them. And it's a bioretention facility, so the plants make it look nice. The median is a lot more attractive. They were really, really pleased with that. There was also a significant amount of off-site flow from what I understand. So you notice on the top left-hand side, they put a squash pipe in underneath it. So they're trying to still honor and serve the function of what they're replacing. But at the same time, everything that's coming from the road now can be infiltrated through that center strip. And so that's a huge benefit. And you're going to see that squash pipe in the middle probably doesn't need to be as big as it would have been if you just straight up replaced it without doing something with the median. And you've noticed that I've kind of leaned heavily on the LID stuff. So I don't want to only talk about LID. There's other things that ecology is interested in funding. There's other opportunities, and this was one that kind of sprang to mind that I was involved with. The City of Olympia and the South Puget Sound Community College, they came up as a joint applicant, and I've seen a couple other successes where the municipalities have looked at some of the educational institutions because they'll have some land. They might have some space where you can do a lot of things. And so this one, as I said, it's not LID, but it doesn't blacklist it for us. We're not only interested in doing that. In some places, you know, you can use a tape device, and that's what these focus on, is some tape devices. Okay, they threw in some bioretention, but they were mostly tape devices to cover a lot of the parking lots that weren't doing much and going directly into Percival Creek. So there was a whole lot of parking, a whole lot of contamination that can come off of parking. It's one of the worst sources of pollutants. And so they did this in multiple phases. This was only one they did. They did 2 phases of the grant and were very successful. I think they got all of their parking lots treated. There's acres and acres of parking that are now not discharging directly to this salmon-bearing stream. And they threw in a bioretention. And some educational opportunities through the little signage, but it was a great opportunity to do this. And again, it wasn't, in this case, the community college they didn't have a lot of money to tear up and redo all the permeable pavement. They didn't have the time to do that. This was still something that could be done, and you can see in some tight spaces they were trying to fit in these huge vaults. But they managed to do it, and they got some benefits that were really something that ecology wanted to encourage. Okay. So I can't just talk about the great stuff, because it's not always great. There's always things that don't go that well, or there's problems that I've seen come up over and over again. I purposely limited myself to one slide, because that's what I do all day. I have to look through these projects that everyone puts their heart and soul into, and I'm like, oh, you missed this. Oh, you forgot that. So these are the things that I've seen come up quite a bit. And I'm hoping to share it so that it's lessons learned, and that folks in this room, if they're going forward with other projects, that they start thinking about these things ahead of time. And that's the biggest message for all of these, is plan ahead as much as you can. High groundwater. You know, I'm going to come back to this message I was giving you a little earlier about the low impact development, that people have this feeling that ecology is all about low impact development everywhere. We're not quite about it everywhere. We're about it where it works. So if you have high groundwater and you put in a bioretention facility, you would be doing the opposite of being helpful. The bioretention facility, the media can be holding some of these metals, and then you have this groundwater that comes up and it saturates it, changes the chemistry, and it drops out those metals in one fantastic great slug. We're not a big fan of that. So this is why it's one of our infeasibility criteria is high groundwater. And wherever you know this going in, that really will tell you what you should be thinking about doing in the areas you need to deal with. Infiltration testing, a lot of what I've seen has relied heavily on soil-only testing. And what I mean by soil-only testing is there's this really great, neat soil test that you get the gradation, and then it tells you the infiltration rate that we have in our manual. There's another one that we got rid of in the 2012 manual, and I understand it's attractive. You know, you get this, you dig up the soils, you look at the soils, and you get a rate. The problem with most of the areas that we're looking at is if they've been impacted by glaciers, if there's compaction, that doesn't really tell the full story, and we can't accept that as enough information to tell us what's going on when water gets introduced into that medium. How is it going to travel? So ecology has some pilot infiltration tests, is what we encourage. It's not, you know, we don't have an extensive list, and the 2012 manual hasn't been fully integrated, so some other municipalities might come up with some other ideas for what infiltration is appropriate. I mean, we can, these are retrofit projects, so it's a good way to test some of these ways to see how well these you know, diagnostic tools for infiltration work. I'd encourage you to do that, but I don't want people to short themselves on only looking at the soil when you could really gather more information by doing some infiltration tests, by introducing water into the soil and seeing how well it behaves on site. Wetlands have been a challenge in some cases. We have something called, one of the things that there's been confusion a couple of times, we have something called a stormwater treatment wetland as one of our BMPs. It's not a wetland. It's a stormwater treatment device. And so if you're going into a wetland and then replacing it with a stormwater treatment wetland, that's not a straight trade. There's some guidance, and someone talked about things not being in the most obvious places. In our appendices, we talk about what wetlands you can impact at all that we would consider. And we really, if you have a low value wetland and you can get a side benefit, it's a maybe. But under the grant program, we're really trying to find the best water quality treatment we can get in the best areas. And if it was a wetland, that would, for me, already signal an alarm of, I'm kind of concerned that that's the first place you're going. If that's the only option you have available, it's possible. And then we'll talk about a couple bullets down about what that means when you come into a wetland. There's always permitting challenges. So tape devices, let's move on to those. I don't know if everyone knows what the tape device program is. Everyone kind of comfortable with that? It's early in the morning, so you all seem comfortable with everything. So manufactured devices that ecology looks at, Doug Howey and the program at UW, and there's a board of technical reviewers, looks through the lists that are submitted to us, and it's a huge list. And so it's really important that on that tape device it says after it GULD, General Use Level Designation. So under the grant programs, again, we're kind of going for sure things. We want to know that the money the legislature has given us is going to go into something that we've vetted and can stand behind. So that's the highest level. It's the GULD ones. So we have to make sure those are in play. One of the bigger challenges is there's sometimes I've seen a misconception that we'll just use one here. But there are things like, how big is it, and will it fit where you want to put it? What kind of elevation drop are you looking at? Do you have that kind of space in your stormwater system, or is your pipe too high? That has put a kink in a lot of these projects. So I just encourage you guys to think about that. So BMP designs themselves. Again, I talked about the bioretention one. I don't need to harp on that, but when we do look at these grant projects, you know, we want to make sure that you're designing it to fit the BMP that you're implementing. There's some requirements that you need to think about. Do you have enough sediment control going into a pond? Those kinds of things. You want to leave yourself enough space. There is an area, because these are retrofits, they don't need to serve new and redevelopment most of the time, that you can make it smaller, but even smaller doesn't mean you can throw all the design criteria out the door. We want to make sure it still works. Utility conflicts, I've heard people come back and say, and some of our grants have had to be extended because they really didn't have enough information about utility conflicts. Some areas need potholing. Again, I am not the boot on the ground myself, so I'm not going to pretend to know all the complexities. In my past experience in private practice, Yeah, I would be potholing some areas a lot to make sure I knew exactly what was going on exactly there. So that's something to think about. Permitting, wow, that can throw a wrench in things. So that's where wetlands come into play is one example. If you have to get permits through the Army Corps, for instance, not to badmouth anyone, but there's certain permits that take a long time. And even within the internal jurisdictions, their own permitting process has stood in the way of getting these projects built because they have other concerns that are important that need to be addressed. One municipality, one department was concerned that by putting this in, it was going to cause a new flooding problem in another area. So those are the kinds of things you want to try to think about before you go in. Cultural resources, very important, and we talk about it a little bit in all of our, whenever we're interacting with folks. Cultural resources is required to be completed prior to even doing investigational work. So even when you're just digging a test pit under the grants, we've got a clear statement that you have to have your cultural resources evaluation done. And we have a lovely bunch of folks in Jessica's group who work hard on getting that done. Some folks have tried to go directly to the Department of Historic Preservation, and they've asked, please don't. They just want one central conduit to get that done. And it takes a little bit of time, so we'll need to do some planning on that. But it's an important step. Recently we had a discovery of some remains in one of our projects, and we were glad we had the process done. There's an inadvertent discovery plan that needs to be on site. Very important stuff that if you go through the cultural resources, you'll be fine. And property acquisition. Wow, it's another one that's hard to do, right? It's hard to buy stuff. So that can put a kink in things. If we see in a grant application, 2 grant applications side by side, and someone doesn't have property that they're trying to put things on, it makes it hard for us to know that you're going to be able to do that if you don't have the property. So be sure that you do. Be sure that you've got enough space to do what you need to do. So those are the general cautionary tales.